Okay, so it's Sam, and I'm here talking about Saturn-Ketu, talking about an upcoming, oops, this is the wrong chart, upcoming um, new moon in Aries. Let me just pull up a new chart here. And Akshaya Tritiya, which is a new, or which is a special time of year, and other things. So this is the chart of the moment that we have right now. Let me just bring it up here like this. Okay. And that should be good right there. Okay. So we have this chart of the moment. This is the literally right now here on May 2nd, and we're at 5:05 in San Diego, California, and I see some people here coming in. And so as I said, what I'm talking about is Saturn-Ketu conjunction. You see it's exact. I'm also going to be talking about when the moon and sun come together here for this new moon. And then I'm also going to talk about Akshaya Tritiya, which is another interesting thing. So other than that, it's not going to be a conversation where I'm just like answering a lot of questions. I see already people want me to talk about all the dashas and stuff, which I'm not going to be doing. Maybe at the end we'll also talk about or have some, like answer some questions mainly about what I talked about. But if you want, you could maybe ask a question here and there as well. So first I want to start with this Saturn-Ketu conjunction because it's really, of course, very, urgent right now. As you can see, this whole thing that I have actually been talking about for quite a while, this Saturn-Ketu is very much a big issue now. They're exact, and they're going to be exact for a while, at least like within a degree or two for quite a while. As we see the 2623 and then 2601, and if we even move forward here a few days, like if we go forward a few days, you see Ketu start to separate a little bit, but then Saturn starts to move, and then Saturn will catch up and retrograde and catch up to it eventually, but it's within a couple degrees for months, and that means until it's like October or so. It's a long time to be that close. If we just keep going back, you see Saturn catches up. Now we're in June. You see they're kind of exact, and then Saturn passes. Now we're in July. We're still within about a day or so. You could see now Saturn has gone past, but it starts to slow down, and then it'll go retrograde back. This is August. You see, this is just day after day. Look, they're still within a couple degrees now. Saturn has started to turn retrograde. And now it's back again and then as it turns retrograde, it starts to get back and it starts to separate. Actually, it's by August, 1958. Yeah, so it starts to separate around August. You can see even here. But even through August, it's still within a couple degrees. So anyway, you can notice how now it's, this is literally exactly 2 degrees by early September. So again, even then, that's still very close. So it's within a couple of degrees for months and months. And so this is, this does not happen very often. So what does it mean? Well, of course, Saturn is the planet of our fears, our stresses, worries, how we are handling those things. And Ketu brings a lot of focus on it and a lot of scrutiny, pressure. Saturn is already pressure filled. And so you might really be noticing a certain area of your life that is feeling stressed and that is stressful and that is being pressured, whatever house this sign of Sagittarius falls in is going to experience that. If you're Pisces, you're going to feel that pressure and stress in your 10th house. If you're Aries, you're going to feel it in your 9th house. If you're Gemini, in your 7th house. So I did a 2019 forecast. Wonder how many of you got it. And again, in the 2019 forecast, I spoke about these things. Of course, I spoke about this Saturn-Ketu hanging around for this couple of months, but I talked about it with specific detail for each of the signs. So if it's the Aries forecast, I talked about how this was going to be a time of enormous 9th house pressure, which has to do with your teachers getting pressured, your teachings, your belief systems. Again, if it's Pisces, I talked about how your career was going to be pressured, all of that stuff. So it's very much a major cycle. And in my 2019 forecast, I talked about it for all of the different, the 10 indicators that I mentioned. So again, it's why it's very important to also understand these things from each ascendant, because the ascendant, the rising sign, is how we're judging these things for each person. As much as we all want to know how it affects us, that's the main way to find out. So if you're a Virgo ascendant, this is going to be really affecting your heart, your home, literally, maybe like your mother, your comfort zone, those things that make you happy and that you feel comfortable with. So, this also is happening in the sign of Sagittarius, which makes us very philosophical, or we should be philosophical in Sagittarius and discover what inspires us, discover what's truthful and what's right, and connect with the righteousness and the truth of things, higher wisdom. Also notice where we've been wrong about some things and let go of those things where we're wrong or where our philosophies and principles are not correct, right? Because they should be experiencing a lot of pressure right now. And, you might be noticing and seeing a lot of things that are leading you to a place where you let go of those false ideas, those false notions that you have, right? And many times we just cling to our beliefs and we just keep defending our beliefs, right? Even if they're wrong, even in the face of clear evidence that contradicts us, right? We just want to hang on to what we believe already, and it's just based on our biases or our beliefs, something that just feels right to us. And so we might say a whole bunch of things that are not true. You hear people do this around, again, it's hard to avoid controversies when you start speaking honestly or speaking specifically, but politics, just big truths that are coming out. People don't want to acknowledge those big truths, or other things that we have a stake in, where our opinions are driving it more than intelligence and wisdom. So right now you might see some of those things are being challenged. I've noticed from all sides, there's a lot more intelligence, discrimination, actual truth, and those things coming out now. And it's much harder when those things do come out to keep defending and holding on to our beliefs. So just notice any areas in your life where you're hanging on to a worn out version of truth, where it's just based on some belief that you have that's not actually true. It'll keep going like that. And again, part of the reason is because Rahu in Gemini, again, this is a common theme that I've been saying now for a couple, for about a month, actually since last year, but especially since Rahu went into Gemini. More information, more data, and good information coming out it's going to destroy our false ideas. So certainly, like if you're a teacher or you're someone, then it's good news, especially if you're teaching good stuff. If you're not teaching good stuff and you're leading people down the wrong path and you're making mistakes because of your fired up fanatical views rather than the truth, then those fanatical views are going to get challenged and tested, and start noticing how those things are happening around you, right? So, this is just the nature of the world. It's the nature of the mind as well. Our mind and ego and sense of separation are always, they're hard to maintain. So on a deeper level, it's also, there's a kind of spiritual crisis that's happening around a certain area in our life and around certain areas in our life. Again, and especially the spiritual crisis happening, in areas that relate to things like, our sense of even, who we are on a very primal level. Saturn is actually the main planet of that separation from spirit. Saturn is the energy that gives us the feeling of separation, gives us the feeling and the pain of separation. And again, that separation from spirit is also like a separation from the truth. And we really feel that separation from the truth, and we really notice that separation from the truth in Sagittarius. And we feel the separation from spirit, like pure spirit, in Pisces more. Because Pisces is that spirit part that's ruled by Jupiter. Sagittarius is are the teachings that take us closer to the truth, you might say. But definitely, Saturn in Sagittarius has shown a kind of pressure, and even a maybe painful pressure, on our belief systems for the last couple years, starting in early 2017. And again, we can see that in our world. It's not necessarily spiritual teachings and whatnot. It's also politics. It's the shared world we live in. The reason I talk about those things is because we also have a vision and a sense of the world we live in. And that's also been very pressured the last couple years, thinking that, a certain political situation or a particular country or a particular thing was a certain way, and now having it totally shattered right before our eyes, right? That's kind of Saturn going through Sagittarius on that level. Sagittarius is not just God's law, it's also man's law, man-made law in the sense of righteousness. But again, in a more metaphysical way, it's just about who we are and the sense that we're separated from the deeper consciousness and deeper spirit, and how painful that is. So this Saturn-Ketu actually, especially really feels like that separation from spirit that we've maybe really neglected for a while. That separation from spirit, pure spirit, because we had this idea that, okay, this is who I am, and I believe these things, and we believe it. We buy into it, when actually it's not real. All those ideas that you have about who you really are aren't real. They're not really who you are. I said it a while ago on one of my live hangouts, this whole idea where you're not who you think you are, and you're not what others think you are, but you are what you think others think you are. At least in the level of ego, the level of identity. But even beyond all of that, none of that is true, because underneath it all, you're nothing, and you're everything. You're the void, you're the formless, you're the pure spirit taking form in an individual arrangement of divine energy. And there are no mistakes. Nothing's wrong. There are no errors. You don't make mistakes. You don't do any of that. You're on a growth path, a growth process, an evolutionary path. And the reason you're on, and this one in particular, in this lifetime, through this body, is because of the actions that you have to perform so that you can learn specific lessons on this earth with this body and this mindset and this nervous system and this arrangement of challenges to push up against. Because if you're just in that unembodied spirit state, there's no friction, there's nothing to push against. You know, you don't build your muscles by, you know, if I want to lift this thing, put it in the camera, if I want to lift this, my dirty coaster, I can, if I keep lifting this, I'm not going to get any new muscles. It's too light. But if I want to get muscles, you know, there's some heavy stuff, heavy books, heavy stuff that I can lift. I'm looking around. There's nothing heavy. I'm looking for a book that I just bought that's about this thick. And it's actually on ancient astronomy and zodiacs and mathematical calculations. It's usually up there on the shelf, and that book is about this thick. It shows you how much I study. But if you want to get muscles, you got to do some heavy lifting. So we're here in this lifetime. You're asking why I'm talking about that, because we got to do some heavy lifting here on Earth. You're not, even though the spiritual essence is your essence, it's the essence of everything. And I say, yes, you're that on the deepest level. That's not how you live. You don't live through that. You live through this heavy form, through this Saturn domain of, you know, these limitations and this heavy flesh body imposed upon that light, you know, imposed upon that lightness. Even though your essence is that pure spirit, you have karma. That's what karma is the mistakes or the misunderstanding of who you truly are, because you don't remember that you're this spiritual being. You have to come here to remember it and to build up the muscles. And the only way to remember it is to do things that you think are going to give it to you and then have it not work and then have you work harder so that you can evolve. That process in aggregate has to do with Saturn. Saturn is that limitation imposed upon your light nature, your body of light. This is why Saturn, if you even look in the chart, Saturn rules these two signs. This is Capricorn and Aquarius. And these two signs are opposite Cancer and Leo, which are the two signs ruled by the two planets of light, what are called the luminaries. So Saturn is opposite both the sun and the moon. Saturn's opposite the moon in the way that it rules Capricorn and the moon rules Cancer, and it's opposite the sun in the way that the sun rules Leo and Saturn rules Aquarius. Right? So this opposite energy is very much the imposition of karma and the magnitude of time and the magnitude of limitation and what we would even call death placed upon that lightness, that light body. And the sun is invigorating through Leo, and the sun is that pure spirit, what in Sankhya philosophy is called Purusha, or even Paramatman, or Supreme Self. And the moon is the light of the mind and the soul, which incarnates from lifetime to lifetime in what's called Prakriti, or form, and also the Jiva Atman. Saturn is opposite both. That says there's limits. You only get to live so long in the body. You only have so much time. And you're only going to get so much happiness. You're only going to get so much power, so much connection, so much intelligence, so much inspiration, so much joy in this lifetime. So Saturn puts a limit on all of those things. And again, you can just, if you look in your natal chart, if you want to really understand Saturn's influence on you, you look at the houses where Saturn goes, you look at any planet Saturn joins or aspects, and it shows the main things that feel limiting to you. Saturn is joined, like in your birth chart, if he's joined, let's say Mercury, then it shows that you're always going to feel a little bit like you have limited information, limited intelligence, limited skills. You're always going to feel the limitation. Now, that could defeat you, or it could make it stronger. Because if you're feeling limited, you have to work harder to make it stronger. And this is why Saturn also rules what's called the Mamsa Dhatu. In Ayurveda, Saturn rules the Mamsa, or the muscle Dhatu. And sometimes people are confused about why Saturn rules muscle and not Mars. But this is why. Because Mars rules what's called like the nerve or the marrow as well. Mars is what converts it's basically what takes the potential for energy and makes it energy, makes it energetic. That's Mars. Majja rules Majja. Saturn rules Mamsa, or muscle, because muscle comes from doing the thing I just talked about, doing something over and over again. Doing something over and over again builds a muscle. You don't build a muscle from doing it once in a burst of energy. You get a muscle by doing it over and over again. So this is why Saturn stuff, again, when this limitation is placed on something, think of lifting weights. You're literally pushing against resistance. That's what you're doing. That's what Saturn is. We're pushing against resistance in Saturn, or with Saturn. So you look in your natal chart to see, like, whatever house Saturn is in, it's going to bring the feeling of limitation in that area of life. So we're going to work harder to improve that thing. Someone put 7th house, Marlene did. Saturn actually brings power to the 7th house. It's actually very strong there. I just did the Digbala course, and Saturn has directional strength in the 7th house because we're supposed to work hard with other people. We're also supposed to be careful. We're also supposed to recognize the limitations and recognize the dangers. All these are virtues of Saturn. So it's good in the 7th house because we're careful, we make a commitment with 7th house things and Saturn. And so you can look and notice anything that Saturn also aspects. He brings that sort of pressure to that thing, and that pressure is the resistance against which we push. And so, someone's mildly correcting or saying about Mars and the nervous system. Yes, it's the nervous system. That's what it's. I think I said nervous system. So anyway, you guys all know sometimes I have to not watch the cuts because they can be a little distracting. So yes, Majja means the nerve. It literally means nerve, or like the nerve tissue, the nervous system that converts the potential into movement through the nervous system, right? Okay, so Saturn-Ketu again is bringing a lot of these themes in a lot of focus. So that's why I'm talking a lot about Saturn in general, how Saturn in Sagittarius shows this pressure now brought to bear on what inspires us. Now that Ketu is there, Ketu is about that sort of absolute perfection of, in some ways, this absolute perfection of God, this standard that we expect and aspire and notice in life. The way I explain Ketu is it's kind of like a virtuoso energy, right? And even though it might be great to see a virtuoso, someone who's a virtuoso at something also only kind of recognizes, or can have a tendency to only notice and recognize where something is not perfect, where all the mistakes are. So for example, notice something that you're really good at, and notice how if you're really good at it, it's sometimes harder to enjoy it just for itself, because it's something that you're so good at that you recognize all of the detriment and recognize all of the things that's not, where it's not perfected, where it's not good, where it's not, again, perfect. So a virtuoso piano player, we can listen to them play and we get a lot of satisfaction from it, a lot of benefit. But him who's playing it, after he's done, we're all clapping and saying, oh, that was amazing, that's amazing. And what he's thinking is, if you knew how many mistakes I made, I missed this note, I missed that note. And so Ketu is kind of, especially when he's really powerful, and Ketu in Sagittarius is very powerful. It's a very powerful placement for it. Because we're supposed to bring a lot of scrutiny and a lot of perfectionism to things like our beliefs. That's a good place for it. Rather than just blindly trust what we're told, rather than just blindly trust some religion or some faith, we're supposed to scrutinize it and look for all the imperfections and flaws in it. It's actually a very good use of Ketu energy, is to drill down into things like Sagittarius beliefs and hopes. Just why it's also why Rahu is so good in Gemini, because Gemini is very good for the things Rahu is doing. That's why this axis to me is the most overall beneficial to a person's life and to what their nodes are trying to do especially. So it's a very powerful Ketu that is drilling down into all of that Saturn in Sagittarius pressure. It's drilling down into Saturn, which is really saying, listen, this is no joke, dude. This is no joke. You're not going to live forever. You only have so much time. This isn't a game. And whatever area that Saturn-Ketu is in from your natal chart, whatever house it is, that thing is being really focused on now, and seriously. And again, you're either seriously getting the point, or you're seriously avoiding it or being a baby, or whatever aversions you have to being a grown-up around whatever those issues are. And you'd have to look at someone's chart to see how much of a grown-up they are around those issues. But again, it also is supposed to refer us back to the truth of who we really are, and then those ultimate issues become important, which are the ones I'm discussing. About, we've come here with karma. We only have so much time. We only, have, so much even identity through this limited body. So we need to take our time here seriously. We need to not waste it. We need to connect with the source. And we're noticing how, this ain't no game anymore. I mean, even just look at the issues that we face in the world. Again, even aside from anything political. And again, unless you're really just not wanting to be unless you're just live in a fact-free zone, we're destroying the planet. Who knows how much time we have left with where, again, we're about to go in the Northern Hemisphere in another summer, where there could be fires and hurricane seasons and, all kinds of stuff. The ice caps melting at an alarming rate. I mean, and again, unless somehow you just think that 95% of the world's scientists are wrong, you're acknowledging this like, yes, okay, this is really going on. What are we doing about it? Well, kind of nothing. Again, people asking about, Europe and Brexit and countries and the geopolitical chessboard is changing. Again, 2 years ago, you thought it was something completely different than you think it is now, if you're paying attention. Maybe you're not, and maybe that's the other choice. I'm not paying attention to any of it. It'll all work out. I'm spiritual. I don't have to be part of this. Again, this is what a lot of people are doing. Right? They just don't want to look at any of it. Again, all kinds, this is what the pressure looks like. when we start getting pressured around all these things, it forces us to take a stance one way or another. Are we showing up to like actually be in the discussions, or is it just too much? Are we checking out? It makes us have to commit to a sort of worldview that's either positive and thinking, yes, I think we can turn it around, or I think this or that, or no, who cares anyway, and then I'm just going to retreat into my something. But again, all of it, regardless of what it is, and I'm not judging any of it, really, the pressure is there. The energy of the planets are there. I guess the only thing if I would be judging is anything that's fearful and small because we're just afraid to face it. Because again, the problems also come when we define ourselves just by this world. When we just define ourselves based on this limited creature that's not going to live forever anyway, and this world that's not going to be around forever anyway, and the fact that we still only have the moment and the best we can do, whether it's in this world or the next world. Again, all of those scenarios actually do not change anything in the present. You want to understand this, and you want to notice this about all of life's circumstances. Nothing in the world actually changes anything that you do. But the more pressure that you get, the more it reveals who you really are. It doesn't change it, it reveals it. External pressure and worldly pressure doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. Now, maybe it hadn't been revealed until you got pressured. But if you think about that, you'll see it's true. And it can help you really understand even how to move forward in this world now. What is it bringing out? Because again, those people who want to just shut it away and like, or go into some fearful place where it's some kind of protectionism, some kind of otherism. Again, I'm not saying that's bad because it can go in any different direction. But whatever it is, if it's fear-based, the world didn't create that. For example, the immigrants didn't create it, or the leftists, or the rightists, or the Republicans, or the Democrats, or the these, or the that. None of them created your response to it. No situation does. It never does. Your response comes totally from you. The external situations are just going to continually reveal who you are. Think about that throughout your whole life. And again, those are the things that, this is how the world reveals who we are. This is how our karma reveals who we are. And again, the more urgency and the more pressure, the more we can be revealed. And our level of consciousness and awareness can be revealed. So this is how these things are illuminating. These are how these things can show who we really are. Is how we're responding. Are we responding with more compassion toward each other, with more openness, with more fear and anger and hostility? Individually, you only have control over each moment. You can only do the best you can do. And you only get one moment after the next. It doesn't matter. You're never going to get 10 years in the future. You only get each moment. So these are some ideas about this Saturn-Ketu that I think are maybe helpful, hopefully. And again, you notice it's going to be hanging out for months now. Like into 3 or 4 more months almost by the time even we get into September. And it's been coming like, I'm talking about it now because it's exact pretty much here. It's going to be even a little more exact, but we've been feeling the impact of it since the end of March. Since like March 23rd, 24th, and especially, the last several weeks, since early mid-April, it's been even more crunching and crushing and revealing. Notice how much has been revealed to you in the last few weeks about your worldview and what you're ready to stand up for. Are you ready to stand up for a hopeful future? Or does your hopeful future revolve around some dark vision? Is there hope that it's working out and you're inspired by, let's say, the darkness and corruption and the this or that that's getting rooted out, however you see it? Or is that the symptom of the world's going to hell anyway and I better hang on to my own and push everything else out? Again, these are the reactions. We react generously or we react in a kind of miserly way. So that heaviness is great, Marlene, because the heaviness is what creates the diamond out of the lump of coal. We're all lumps of coal. Particularly our mind is a lump of coal. And the pressure of Saturn is what creates the diamond out of the lump of coal. If you didn't have that pressure, you wouldn't know yourself. Because all of your, again, I'll say this last thing and then move on, all of the great moments of self-revelation in your life have come because of some kind of pressure. Some kind of pressure from Saturn. Some kind of pressure of time. And the pressure of time also leads you to solitude, to being alone. And if not being completely alone, at least having to work through whatever the thing is in solitude. And you'll notice where you separate from others. Maybe you were doing a lot of things to try to please others and make others happy. And then you got some extreme pressure. And then you had to clarify and really connect with your sincerity. And then that separated you from others. Again, this is how oftentimes Saturn pressure, we wind up being alone. And again, when we don't understand astrology very well, which a lot of people don't, they act like Saturn is punishing you. It's punishing you by making you alone, making you lonely, being mean. All of that is just being a baby. None of the planetary energies or astrological energies are malefic at all. We're never punished for anything. There's nothing punishing about being alone. You better learn how to be alone because you are alone. No matter what you think. You're alone. And you have people around you, hopefully, that don't destroy your capacity to be alone. You know, the great poet Marie Rainer Rilke, I think is how you say it, had the great line about how the best relationship partners or the best partners are the ones who are the guardians of our solitude. That's a great way to look at it. The ones who aren't threatened by our solitude, but are the great guardians of our solitude. So these are great Saturn virtues, and that's why Saturn comes at the end. And all these great things happen. And his energy is getting really pressured now with Ketu on it. Really looking down deeply into these issues. How much are you sad and depressed because you're noticing and you're being disappointed by those people who you thought you respected and appreciated more. And it's a big part of what I've noticed. Shocked at the responses that I see from people because of the pressures of the world now. And seeing people just go down the toilet, frankly, with their beliefs. And frankly, a lot of it is political kind of stuff and other things as well. Disappointed in how little regard people have, how little compassion is there, how little intelligence is there. And I have to be careful not to be cynical or nasty about it in my own mind and be compassionate and say, all right, I understand. I get it. It's a challenge because it's very easy to get judgmental and bitter, especially when we look at political kind of stuff right now, and stay compassionate and not hate the people, any of them, for thinking what they think or doing what they want to do, and hopefully expect the same in return. So there are big themes: Jupiterian, Sagittarian, Saturnian, Ketunian or Ketuvian. Is it Ketunian or Ketuvian? Leave me a message. Put that in the message box. Ketunian or Ketuvian? Which one? That's the big question we're going to answer. So now we'll talk about the new moon that's coming up. Well, let's move this forward. What's going on? Oh, day. Okay, there it is. Yeah. So we go back a couple hours here even. Yeah, so you can see this is the exact moment of the new moon. And of course, it's in Aries. This is sidereal Aries. Again, just in case people aren't sure. Ketuvian. Okay, I would have thought, yeah, Ketuvian. Well, there's Neptunian. So this is why I thought it might be a Unian, because there's Neptunian, Ketunian. We don't say Neptuvian, but again, that's because Neptune is part of the, I get it. Ketu, all right. But again, just want to say that's very clear in all the Jyotish texts that they use the original zodiac, of course, of the Rashis and Nakshatras in the same space, Ashwini and Aries lined up. So what that does is lock up the whole Nakshatra Rashi schema. And I just came across an amazing video training and teaching from someone who found some amazing mandalas on the cave of an Indian temple that is astounding. I can't wait to do a video about that. I might even do it tomorrow. I'm so inspired by Ketunian. We have a Ketunian. Wow, okay. We got a Ketuvian and a Ketunian. Yeah, I don't know. So, the new moon is when sun and moon are exactly together. And you see it happens on the 4th, May 4th, in a couple days at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. And so when that happens, we start that new cycle. And again, this is the original. This is why there are 12 months in the season, 12 months in the year, right? Timed with the calendar. I recently uploaded a video where I talked with astrologer Theo Naker, and I actually talked about the Indian calendar. It's very worth it. I'm going to do a dedicated video to it soon, but you'll see that the Indians, all the way back, literally 1500 BC, a long time ago, they were already correctly ascertaining the difference between the zodiac, which are planets moving through the sky, and the calendar, which is the Earth going around the sun. So calendar months are related to the Earth going around the sun, and they broke the year up into 12 portions because there are 12 lunation cycles each year. That's the original 12. The original 12 is not 12 zodiac signs. It's 12 months. And so then, and again, months are related to the Earth going around the sun, the calendar. 12 zodiac signs are related to 12 ways of then measuring those portions in the sky, because we have to measure where they're happening. Again, they're happening on Earth relative to different seasons and whatnot. We measure them on Earth with the calendar. That's easy because they're based on Earth going around the sun. But in the sky, we also have to measure them in space. Okay? And so this is why we have these original 12 portions. There were 12 months, and then eventually we broke the sky up into 12 portions as well, so that we could measure them more accurately with 12 portions. And so again, because the sky was always sidereal in Indian thinking, not just sidereal space, which is the zodiac is sidereal space. The zodiac is space. But the Indians also measured time. They actually measured time based on the sun going through different nakshatras. So they were always measuring sidereal time as well. So this is why we have it. And so you can, I tell you this so that you can also understand if someone says, well, new moon in Aries, I thought it was Taurus. You can maybe explain the difference as to why we use this different zodiac in Vedic astrology, because the Western one is literally based on taking the calendar calculation and projecting that into the sky to find the places, whereas India still uses the direct sky portions directly. So it's in Aries. Now, Aries is that sign of starting new things, initiation, trying new things, having the foresight and the wherewithal to assert our individuality and to kind of, take a stand for something because we think it's right. Again, it's ruled by Mars, which is very kind of sort of black and white and logical and, takes action because, again, we think we're right and we're ready to defend it. Right? And so there's a lot of enthusiasm and passion and initiation and starting new things. So again, on May 4th, there's the initiation of that cycle, which is, it's a good month for starting something new, trying something new. Right? That can mean things like studying astrology, for example, or studying something that you're interested in. I'm about to open up my certification course again for a limited time, starting, in fact, like next week, it's going to be opened up again. It's not coincidence that it's coordinated with this cycle. I've been behind the scenes planning when it's been in Pisces because that's the time. Pisces is that sign of the sort of gestation period, that kind of connecting. I've been really connecting with a lot of the different new things that I've brought into my teachings that I want to bring into the course. And again, that's what Pisces is really good for. And I've been excited to maybe even release things then, release the course this last couple weeks especially, but I've also known why I've felt a little directionless. Not really directionless, but I've been more gathering and more interested in and more inspired than I have been to like get out there enthusiastically and bring it forth. So you have to understand our mind changes. These cycles change our mind, and one of the reasons is because the sun has already been in Aries. So there's been a lot of that Aries energy already. And particularly what's also happened, if we go back a couple days to where we are right now, we notice that as I record this now here on May 2nd, Mercury is just about to finally get out of Pisces. So it went into Pisces, went retrograde into Aquarius, then went back into Pisces. So one of the reasons you also might have felt like you're walking in quicksand for the last couple months, especially if Mercury is your ruling planet, or Mercury is, the Mercury areas have felt kind of stuck for sure the last couple months. If you're like me and you're ruled by Mercury, it's great that you benefit from that Mercury, but sometimes it's like, okay, I've been doing the creativity, got it, the imagination, got it. I want some action. And so, as you see, by this time tomorrow even, watch. And notice tomorrow, again, this is why we do sidereal zodiac, because by tomorrow, notice how much more enthusiasm and energy and drive and passion you're going to feel. Just notice it. These are the kinds of things that you do aside from what's ever in the books. If the stuff that was in the books didn't work, I wouldn't use it. I've been doing daily forecasts and these kinds of things since 2006. Yes, that's 12 years. So I've been walking this talk of zodiacs and all this stuff for a long time, and making accurate predictions about these things based on zodiac signs for forever. And again, other people that use other zodiacs, that's fine if they use it, but the things that I say and the things that I see as being correct, especially to interpret the Vedic astrology techniques, in all the books it's sidereal. So there's really kind of, unless there's some reason to not use it because it works. But notice yourself tomorrow, conduct your own experiments, and see how you feel tomorrow, or even notice if even now you're feeling a more like an enthusiasm with Mercury about to leave that first house, with Mercury about to leave Pisces and go into Aries. Notice how much more enthusiasm and passion around your ideas is coming, even tomorrow. But then again, the next day on the 4th, we have that new moon. Sun and moon come together in Aries, ready to hit the ground running and enthusiastically pursue your passions with enthusiasm. And again, it's very obvious with nakshatras and rashis aligned, especially because the first nakshatra in Aries is Ashwini. 2 horses running forward. Boom. Again, the problem is when you're not using that, then Aries winds up being somewhere at some micro degree of Pisces somewhere. That nakshatra, Those nakshatras in Pisces and that section of the zodiac has nothing to do with the enthusiasm and passion of Aries, the Rashis, and the nakshatras. It's the same portion of sky. Of course, it's the same energy. The nakshatras are going to show the portion just like the Rashis. This isn't ever been disputed for 2,000 years of Vedic astrology. Now that there's a few people that say it, again, it confuses a lot. And again, this is one of the problems with the times that we live in as well, is we can't discern between an authoritative teaching, textual reference with the gravitas of thousands of years of uncontroverted wisdom. And, well, but I don't know, there's a couple guys saying this now. I just can't seem to figure it out. Which is more authoritative? This whole thing, this false equivalence is what it's called. False equivalence, right? We equivocate with everything. Well, I don't know, there's a few guys on the internet that say the earth is flat, so now I'm totally confused. Like, come on. And then we don't look deeper into it either. We don't investigate. So anyway, these are things that we all have to look at. These are the part of the problem with the times we live in now. Problem of the times we live in now is this false equivalence and equivocating constantly. And by the way, I said this very explicitly about Rahu going through Gemini and the times we're living in now. I even said it beginning of this as well, is that this Rahu going through Gemini is bringing good teachings and good information into the world. And so those people who are hanging on to these wrong philosophies and fanatical views that aren't backed up by true data, and again, it's not beliefs, it's the actual facts, are going to have a hard time. And this is exactly what Rahu and Gemini is about. It's bringing out the facts. So we're going to be seeing that, and those facts coming out shifts our beliefs. Even if we were right, just seeing the world shift and all the beliefs shift is still kind of unsettling. So 30 days of this sun moon in Aries, the beginning of that cycle is going to be a time of enormous forward momentum and velocity and enthusiasm. And the fact that Mercury is also joined it now and out of that kind of quicksand feeling a little bit. Again, it was great for creativity and reflecting on what we wanted to bring forth. It was great for that. But now it's time to really move forward. And in Aries, it's very much about enthusiastically bringing your ideas out into the world. And Mercury will be really powerful for the next few months, going through Aries and then Taurus, then Gemini. So it's very good for all this studying kind of stuff and those virtues, right? Now we see that it's in a nakshatra of Bharani. Now again, this is that section of Aries that's related to feeling constrained a little bit after the creative passion and drive of Ashwini and those twin horses coming out. Again, those horses can be running in different directions and it can just be a lot of energy. This is why we join the two horses together. They even yoke the horses, right? Even on a horse and carriage, they usually have something that joins the two horses because they start running in different directions and then we're going nowhere. So this is a great lesson. This nakshatra of Bharani shows where that energy of Ashwini creates a result and produces a result in Bharani. This is why the symbol of Bharani is the reproductive organs of the woman, the womb and the uterus and all of that, to actually create a result. This is what it symbolizes. It symbolizes the idea that your energy, the energy that you put forth into life, produces a result. And that result is always a restriction on some level. Even if it's something you wanted. In fact, make sure it's something you want. Because even if it's something you want, you're now going to have to maintain it. So be careful what you focus on, because you're going to get it. It's going to produce a result, and then you're going to have to own it. then it's going to be yours. The most obvious is something like a child, but everything we produce is a child, right? I'm doing it right now. I'm producing something. This video is my child, you might say. So I be careful what I do. I could come on here and say a bunch of nonsense, and people do all the time. They are enthusiastic to do something, so they do something and they get on and they say a whole bunch of stuff, and what is it? It winds up being a mess. They wind up creating more problem than anything else, and then they got to bear that result. You have to bear the result of what you do, of what you create. So this is why Bharani, which is one of the most severe nakshatras, it literally comes from the root word to bear the result of what you're doing. Notice where it comes. It's the second nakshatra, right after Ashwini, which is the most enthusiastic. The next one is the most severe. Are you sure you want to bear that result? So it teaches us restraint, to be restrained. I did a recent nakshatra summit with a bunch of astrologers recently. It's a video on my channel. And one of the nakshatras we talked about was Bharani. I believe it was with Sunil Ji of India, lovely Indian woman who had a lot of great things to say, and we talked about this transition from Ashwini to Bharani, and just the intensity of that lesson, right? And so again, that will be important for the next 30 days as well, is to, again, be careful what you focus on, be careful what you do, because you'll have to bear the result of that. So when there are planets here, like people have planets there in their natal chart, they can often have the feeling of being restricted and restrained and feeling like they have to restrain their enthusiasm. As such, again, one of the things to be careful of with this, not just in your natal chart, but for the next 30 days, because the new moon is in Bharani, is be careful about the need or the feeling of sort of punishing people, literally punishing people. And we might feel the temptation to punish people, right? And to, of course, because they deserve it, because we decided they deserve it. Again, notice what happens when you punish people. You have to then bear that result when we're punishing. Karma and all this stuff is very cyclical, and Yama is very much a karmic entity, as much as any. This nakshatra has more to do with what we would call karma, in the sense of how our actions come back to us as a result, than maybe any other nakshatra. I mean, Yamaraj is the lord of consequences, right? That's who the deity is here. So again, be alert and be aware of any kind of retribution or any kind of punishment that you might feel is deserving, that you feel justified in doling out to others. Again, notice what happens when we punish. Again, by the way, I've never had children and all like that. I don't know. But the kinds of punishments that we give to our children come back to us eventually. The kind of punishments even that we give other people or whatever, even though I don't have children, telling somebody off because of what they did or whatever, that comes back to you. So these are important lessons, but in the positive, it's about really concentrating and focusing and having not just restraint, but also a kind of cool, measured calculation and a very strategic awareness of what you're doing and how you're putting your energy in the world. Okay? And lastly, there's a very auspicious day that comes right here. Every year, it's called Akshaya Tritiya. And Akshaya Tritiya is where we have both the sun and the moon exalted. And it happens every year. Tritiya is the lunar day. You see, it's Shukla Tritiya. And it's the day when both the sun and the moon are exalted. It only happens once, and it's on the Tritiya, not the Dvitiya. And it's because on the Tritiya, the moon has moved far enough away. Chaturthi, the next one, it might be in the next sign. So the reason, is because the second lunar day, the moon is still pretty dark. But here on Tritiya, it's 2 nakshatras away. It's starting to get lighter. And we have both the sun and the moon exalted. So this day, which is May 6th, is a very auspicious day to plan new things. Like for instance, if you have a business or you have something that you're interested in growing, which we all are. I mean, it could even be like a garden or a new project or something in your life that you're interested in growing or launching or whatever. This is a great day to do it. You could look for something big for me on those days, on May 6th especially. Could very well be the day that, and it's on Tuesday, I believe, isn't it? What is the day? Monday. Okay, Monday. Where we might launch something new or do something new, and that shows a high possibility for success. And again, the sun, these are the 2 luminaries, and I talked about them earlier, that Saturn was opposite the sun, because the 2 luminaries are the real lights. The sun is the Paramatman, the Supreme Self, the light that we're trying to connect with. And the moon is that light which goes with us from lifetime to lifetime, and is in the form of our mind and consciousness. So all of our karmas come into the mind first as our ideas and our samskaras. Your karmas are really basically what in yoga we call samskaras, which are deep mental patterns or habits. It's more like habits more than anything. Your karma, again, we tend to make it out to be something that's so hard to figure out. It's really not. You have a bunch of tendencies to see things a certain way. Where did they come from? Well, they came from all of your lifetimes, your patterns in this lifetime as well, which is a continuation, and how you see the world, and your mental preconceptions and your deep biases that have been created as a result. That's what the astrology chart is. It's nothing more than that. When I'm reading someone's chart, I'm reading their mind. I'm reading their tendencies to see things how they see them. I'm talking about this because all of that is stored in aggregate in the moon. This is why I find that the Nakshatra dashas, especially Vimshotri dasha, is the most comprehensive, the most universal, and it's not just I think it, Parashara said it too, of all the dashas. There are other dashas for other things. I use Chara dasha for certain predictions, even Yogini dasha for some things, but for overall reading the samskaras of the individual, the nature, the karmas that are arising, and the overall life, and how it fits into the overall life process, Nakshatra dashas are really powerful because it shows the moon, Nakshatra is where it starts, and then the different dasha cycles unfold, and you're reading the karmic tendencies, the samskaras, in relationship to each planet. I'm talking about this because the moon is where the karma is in this lifetime, and the sun is beyond. It's the soul's nature, beyond incarnation even, beyond the non-localized self. This is the local self. Through the ascendant, you're born, and you have this local self. But then the non-local self is the sun, which is beyond incarnation in the highest sense. And then in between the two is the moon, the mind and heart going in between the limited experiences through the ascendant and the infinite self of the sun. This is why we're all a little sort of crazy, because the moon is trying to bridge those things and creates a lot of samskaras and ideas and feelings to try to bridge it. So on Akshaya Tritiya, both of them are as powerful collectively as they ever are, because they're both exalted, or in the exalted sign. Now again, it's not talked about, but the opposite of that placement is symbolized by, I'm going to leave that up to see if anybody can tell me what they think the opposite of Akshaya Tritiya is. It's an Indian holiday that most closely resembles the opposite of Akshaya Tritiya. By the way, people can ask me some questions if they want. I'll hang out a little bit. Please try to keep it about something that we all benefit, not something like in my chart and ask me to do a reading, because I'm not going to do that. It's just not that interesting. But I do first put out a question that says, what do you think it's a holiday? It's a famous holiday, one of the most famous, and it's pretty much opposite of Akshaya Tritiya, astronomically. So think about what that means. And if you got any questions, you can ask me questions. We'll see if we get some good ones. It would be great if it was about something I talked about. If not, try me and ponder the question. Little Jeopardy question. Opposite Akshaya Tritiya, yeah, but what? There's a holiday that's associated with around that time of the year. What is the holiday associated with the time of the year where we have sun and moon opposite? I'll give a little bit. How to deal with Saturn's difficult energy. Well, solitude is good. Service. Yes. Diwali. Yes. Deepavali is the holiday. I'll explain why in a second. But I did get a question about how to deal with Saturn's difficult energy. Well, again, the difficulty of Saturn, it is Diwali. So the difficulty of Saturn comes from not wanting to face the unpleasant things I talked about. So again, when it comes to remedies, there are a couple things that can really benefit Saturn's energy. And again, some of them are physical, but it's literally the direct meditation and solitude are the most important, and also service, being humbled. You see, the thing that Saturn really hurts is our arrogance, because we're arrogant, because we think we're something, that we think we deserved more. I should have been treated better, and I thought all the regrets, and it's actually frustration and anger that we can't do anything about. And it leads to bitterness and regret and fear. And that's the real pain of Saturn. And the problem of Saturn is those things we can't go back and fix. Because we can't go back and fix them, now we're worried about it happening in the future. And we're stuck in time somehow. We're stuck in time, and the ego and the arrogance of the ego and again, be honest about what that means. You feel like you deserved better and didn't get it. And there's bitterness, and like we're all twisted up about something. And all of that is the origin of our big Saturn problem. And then we're alone. And of course, we're not alone because we did anything to anybody. We're alone because everybody's mean, and why me, and we get emotional, this whole kind of thing. So the best things to do from a yogic perspective, and by the way, I see the thing about feeding crows and all, you can always do those things. Feed a black animal, something related to Saturday, black seeds, all that stuff. Again, these are things that I don't recommend because they're just kind of, again, it's not that I don't recommend them, but I'm not saying they don't work, but they're not things I recommend, because if you're just doing it because you think you're going to get a payoff, then it's better to understand what Saturn energy is, okay? the best thing is service and to have humility. This is the reason is because of what I just said. Because the pain of Saturn is hanging on mostly to regret and fear of the future, regret about the past, and this kind of thing. And we also, the problem is we get then spirals in on ourself, and there's self-pity and there's depression and all of this stuff. You know, we have the luxury of being depressed here in the West because our biggest problem is kind of like boredom. We're kind of lazy and a little bit bored, and we have time to ponder what went wrong and how bad we were treated, and all of this space and all of this time to just ruminate in psychological struggle and pain. And meanwhile, we're comfortable, we have enough money, we have it. And again, what we need to do is something that's humbling and humble ourselves. That's the basic principle. And since everybody's putting out all of the things about iron fingers or iron horseshoe nail on the middle finger and the crows, I'm just not going to get into all that. If you want to do that stuff too, go ahead. But I'm talking about what's going to change it in someone's mind and consciousness. And I have very little faith that those things will. But if you're in service and it's not working, quote, again, you say working on depression and all that, again, why these things happen. And by the way, let me just also say, the reason these kinds of things can be a little difficult is because I'm not looking at someone's chart. You're saying, what's the cure for Saturn? I have no idea if what you're saying is coming from Saturn. So that's also depression. And I know I said depression. The influence of Saturn maybe on the moon can do that, but I have no idea what's happening that's causing any depression. So this is no particular remedy for any person listening to this. So again, this is why these kind of things, in general, then people personalize it and then acts like I'm saying it about you. I'm not saying this about anyone on this call or on this video. I'm speaking in general. These are the problems of Saturn that people have, is this kind of thing. Okay? I say this because you say you're doing service and whatnot, but you're still depressed, so you'll work on it. I have no idea what that comes from. So again, I'm not answering any question about Saturn in that sense very specifically. So just for all, just so people get that. So anyway, people should just understand that any astrologers or whatever who act like they're actually able to give some general diagnosis for some general thing that's going to be specific to any particular chart or situation, you just can't do it, right? But what I'm saying are the general problems of Saturn. And again, the thing is that we're immature. This all also comes back to a feeling of being immature. There's an immaturity about it because we think we deserved better. I'm so special and it didn't happen. I was mistreated and all of it is a kind of immaturity. Saturn makes us mature. You're not deserving of anything more. None of us are. We're just here. We don't deserve any better. Sorry, but you don't. None of us do. And again, this is when I say arrogance. I would say something like that and people are like, well, I'm not arrogant. Actually, I'm pretty this or that. We're all arrogant. We're all arrogant narcissists who think that the world should make us happy. And when it doesn't, we're pissed off. Face it. Be real. That's your ego. That's everyone's ego. Let's be real, okay? Let's be real. And we're all at a stage of immaturity around that. Something upsets us and we personalize it, right? We personalize it. So it's good to talk about it. One of the biggest things is Saturn. One of the best lessons we can learn from Saturn is not to take anything personally. Not to take anything personally. Karma is not personal. Especially with coming from someone else. People are just doing their thing and we're doing our thing and we're hurting people and they're hurting us and it's all just a shadow. It's all an illusion. And we have attachment to it. We have attachment to this limited person in this limited body with this limited nervous system that thinks that something is really happening eternally to me. this person who feels something right now and who gets all worked up about it. This whole illusion is in itself immature. It's an immature notion. And it's fueled by, again, things like arrogance of the ego. Your ego is nothing but an arrogance maker. And the ego is, we're all ego most of the time. We're almost all ego. We think we're this separate thing. Like 99% ego all the time. That's like the only game in town. With the illusion that we're spiritual, it's almost worse. Because we also think we're spiritual. So, I don't have a big ego. I mean, I'm not arrogant. It's not that. He's not talking about me. Yes, I am. I'm talking about you. Really? I know, I'm terrible. So anyway, I'm talking about me too. Believe me, I'm talking about all of us. Until we're enlightened, we're like a monster. We're asuras. We're all asuras. This is what asuras are. What do you think asuras are? Do you think they're in hell somewhere? No, they're in your head. You're the asuras. All of us are. There's a struggle between the devas and the asuras going on in your mind all the time. And you're mostly asuras. You're mostly Rahu, Saturn, wanting to keep all the good for yourself, wanting to throw all the bad onto other people. Oh, I'm upset and angry. I'll throw that onto you. Oh, good stuff. I want to keep all of that. We're just monsters. That's the ego. Now, thankfully, that's not all we are, but it's most of what we are. Admit it. Right? It's the truth. That's the state of mind. This is why we need to do meditation every day. We need to do practices every day. Because every day every day we wake up in this mind that's full of asura demonic energy. It's not demonic in the Christian sense, but this selfish energy. And it's just the ego. That's just what the ego does, trying to survive. We're in between the animal and the God. And this is why we have to do spiritual practices every day. You know, one of my great spiritual teachers said, people sometimes they feel like, I just need to take a break from my yoga. I just need to take a break from spiritual practices for a while. And then she said, okay, that's fine, but when you're taking a break from your spiritual practices, do you ever take a break from your mind? Does your mind stop that day? Do you stop craving the selfishness of the ego? Does the ego shut down when you stop doing your spiritual practices that day? No, they don't. So just like we get up and brush our teeth every day and do other things every day that we don't necessarily like, but we do it because if we want teeth, we better brush them. We have to do that with our mind. We have to do the meditation and the practices every day. Because every day we're living through this matrix of the mind, body, ego structure. It never takes a break. If we take a break from our spiritual practices, we're just taking a break from being spiritual, which means we're not then connecting to the source that day or that year or however long it's been. All right, so let me just say this last thing about the Diwali, because yes, Diwali is opposite. When we have the Diwali, it's when, I'll just go forward and say that Diwali. So Diwali comes around this time every year. It's the new moon here. So if I go back, this year Diwali will be it'll be on probably like October 27th. You could look it up. Diwali 2019 is probably October 27th, right? And it's this day. The sun is debilitated and the moon is, as it's almost in the debilitated sign, but it's also really, really dark. So this is why instead of having it be here, because if you remember Akshaya Tritiya, the moon was still dark, but it had moved far enough away from the sun to where it's not as dark. Remember I said that? Because when the moon is dark, it's one of the most difficult places. So if we waited until the moon was exactly dark, let's say on the Tritiya, on the third day, then it wouldn't be as difficult, it wouldn't be as detrimental for the moon, right? This is Dwitya, this would be the Tritiya, right? 13 and then 19, just like we saw. So on Diwali, it's this day where the sun is debilitated The moon is as close to debilitated without being in the sign as possible, and the moon is completely dark. So in many ways, the sun and the moon, the two luminaries, the sun and moon, are at their weakest, all things considered, on that day when we celebrate Diwali. So why do you think that is? How does that make sense? I'll give you another question. Why do you think we celebrate Diwali, the festival of light, on the day when the moon and sun, the two luminaries, are weakest? Waiting for an answer. So I'll wait for a couple answers here. Because we are goth. I'm waiting for people to type in. Yeah, they're very good, Zach. Yeah. This is how you figure things out. Yeah, because so the whole holiday itself, yeah, that's because that's when you needed the light the most. And think of what we do on that holiday. On Diwali, what we do, because the light is naturally so much, because it's darkest. Because naturally the external light is so dark, what we do is we take the lamps, we consciously do it. We consciously bring the light. We consciously do it because externally it's not as prevalent. And we come together and we light the path of God back to the heart, back to the home. And so the story of the Ramayana is really powerful in this way because Rama and Sita, the main story of Diwali is from the Ramayana, which is Lord Rama and Sita. Rama is literally the avatar of the sun. And his wife, of course, is the moon. But both of them in that story were held captive. He was dethroned. Sita was tortured and mistreated. So both luminaries in the Ramayana, the sun and the moon, were abused and mistreated. Then at the end, we light their way back home on Diwali by creating the clay pots with the light in it. And that symbolizes, of course, the light within, but also lighting the path back to God. That story of Rama and Sita coming back to, what is it, Ayodhya? Is that the name of the city? So someone said it's like upaya. Exactly. That's the kind of upaya that really works to me. And by the way, if doing things like feeding black seeds to crows on Saturday, if that's really something that's connected to your heart, then do it. But the whole thing about upayas and about remedies is that they need to be connected to your heart. If it's just doing something to try to get something, sorry, but it's total ego. And I don't think it really does much of anything. Okay, I was told that I'm supposed to feed dogs on Saturday. Or black dog here, eat the food. Come on, am I getting the benefit yet? Again, we do things because of that, for that purpose, as far as remedies. So when upaya is done because there's love, anything that's done with love is upaya. Love is upaya. So if you're doing it because you love to do the thing, then do it more than anything. If you're doing it because of what you're going to get from it, then I'd say don't do it. Then I would say connect to your heart and serve and love and connect with something that you're devoted to. Because devotion, there are two things that really set us on the spiritual part. Two, and they're the hardest things. One is surrender. You want to know what we can't do? We can't surrender. We even think we know what surrender means. We have no idea. It means give it up. That's all it means. And our ego knows how to do everything except give it up. And that means let go of all of it. Let go of what you want, what you think you deserve, all the stuff. Let it go. Surrender. And we will never surrender until there is devotion. You will only surrender to something you are devoted to. the closest people usually get is they surrender to their children on some level, to the love they have. They're surrendered to it. They almost feel helpless to it on some level. So surrender and devotion go hand in hand. And if someone says that's all I do these days is surrender and devotion, but they're still sad and upset, you have to check what these things are. Again, they're authentic. Authentic surrender doesn't have any regret or fear or anything. I just say this, Marlene, because, again, it's very easy to misunderstand words or not get what's happening. So, again, this is a chat, so it's tricky to work through that kind of stuff. But anyway, so that story of Diwali is very much about lighting the path because the sun is dark and the moon is dark. It's the day when they're the darkest and the weakest collectively. And Akshaya Tritiya is the day when they're collectively the strongest. They're both in the exalted signs, and the moon is far enough away to where it's not totally burnt up. Because if it's the second day, it's still really close, and you want the moon to be bright. So Akshaya Tritiya, it's far enough away. And Diwali, the moon is not only right by debilitated, but it's consumed. Because it's celebrated on that new moon when the sun is debilitated and the moon is right near the same point. Okay? So that's, and Zach said, is that why kids get away with so much shit? Well, some of them do. Some of them don't. So anyway, nice conversation. I'm glad we, had some time, and I just, okay, let me do this. I was going to do an Akshaya Tritiya. I was also going to do a Saturn-Ketu, and I was also going to do a new moon. So I said, all three. We'll do all three. And so if you like this, share it with people. Share it with people for the new moon. Share it with people for the Saturn-Ketu. Share it with people for the Akshaya Tritiya. I may very well come back. I will probably come back and do a separate video on Saturn-Ketu again, and maybe on Akshaya Tritiya as well. But anyway, I appreciate everyone hanging out, and we'll do it again here real soon. What am I doing?